A very good evening and welcome to this week's final episode of On the Record. My name is Vuyo Mvogo. Well, on the show tonight, has the EFF crossed the line? EFF media head Mbuyiseni Ndlozi and SANEF's Adrian Basson debate. But first, a story that didn't grab screaming headlines, but which, to those behind the idea, say is something we should all be concerned about. Well, a group of Afrikaans speaking activists have declared war on traditionally Afrikaans universities and are taking them to the Constitutional Court. Now, parallel to that, they are establishing an Afrikaans university. Is there more to this than meets the eye? Joining us from our Pretoria studio is one of the people in the know about all of this, and that's Ian Cameron of AfriForum. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, and here in the studio, I do have Professor Shadrack Guto, who is a constitutional expert. Let me start with you, Ian, if I may. What is it that you are taking to the Constitutional Court? To what end?
Well, I just need to make a correction. We're not going to the Constitutional Court yet. I think it's something that we have spoken about. But firstly, we would need to follow the correct procedures and go ahead then. But we have launched a 5-point plan today in Pretoria where we speak about the language policies of all the universities throughout South Africa and what we can do to make sure that we conserve Afrikaans at all of these different universities and ensure that all students have access to mother tongue education.
But what does that mean in very practical and real terms? I mean,
well, it's quite simple.
Yes.
If I can explain, it's quite simple. In the last few months, especially since the end of 2015, we've seen an increase in specifically the assault or the attack on Afrikaans as mother tongue education, or as a mother tongue education medium rather, especially at universities such as Stellenbosch, University of Pretoria, Northwest University's Potchefstroom campus. And you know what we are saying is that everyone should have access. This isn't about simply saying that we need to conserve Afrikaans, but also that everyone should enjoy access to mother tongue education. And why do we hear statements from groups like the EFF saying that Afrikaans will be removed because English classes aren't of the right standard? Why are we removing one at the cost of another? Why aren't we developing all the different languages to ensure that everyone has the correct access and the same quality to mother tongue education? And it is possible. You know, later on in the program, I think I will quote from a statement from the UN just last year, where they amplified or made sure that everyone knew exactly why it is so important to make sure that we conserve mother tongue education.
So what do you specifically want a Stellenbosch or the Northwest University, or should I say the Potchefstroom campus of that university, Pretoria University? What do you want those universities to do?
We would like them to come to the party and keep their promises. You know, just last week we heard Wim de Villiers, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Stellenbosch, saying that Afrikaans has a place at Stellenbosch, but just the day after that, 2 of the faculties admitted to have changed their language policy without following the procedure or the correct steps according to the university's whole language policy, and that to us is just not the right way of doing things. And on top of that, it's a constitutional right to receive education in your mother tongue, and for us, it's not only unconstitutional the way that they're acting, but they are also breaking their own rules. And therefore, we are saying, but let's create space for all the different groups to be able to have mother tongue education. We can even look at it demographically. It's a very small percentage of universities in South Africa that present Afrikaans classes, and there's nothing wrong with that. Why is that being threatened when there are so many other options right across the country where all the universities presented in English? And I think it's time that we develop other languages as well.
Professor Guto, do they have a case?
I think that in terms of pushing the boundaries of constitutionalism, they do have a right to do that. However, do they have a chance of winning such a case? I doubt it. I doubt it because we have really 11 official languages in the country, and I think that's a minimal number that the Constitution recognizes. We do have other languages which are, like sign languages. We have languages which are used in religious and spiritual ways and so on. And those are recognized in Section 6 of the Constitution. Are we going to divide the country in a way that universities are then categorized as belonging to any of those 11 plus others? And if we do so, are we trying to build a nation? Or are we trying to keep separation, which was called apartheid, within the new South Africa, using the Constitution really to maintain what people fought to remove and to liberate from? So I don't think that this is a matter that is winnable in a constitutional...
Chapter 2 of the Bill of Rights, Section 29, states that everyone has the right to receive education in their official language or languages of their choice in public educational institutions where that education is reasonably practicable.
Now, the point there is reasonably practicable. Is it practicable to be able to have University of Pretoria, for example, where the majority of the people around speak Setswana or whatever language they speak?
Well, without preempting him, what if he says that, look, you've had that before, why kill it? You had that at Stellenbosch, you had that at the University of Pretoria, you had that at Potchefstroom.
Do we want to maintain the past? No. The liberation as a whole was a question of changing from colonialism, apartheid, to building a new South Africa, which is inclusive. The question is, if you use those languages in those universities, are you really trying to build a nation? And from that point of view, you do have University of Northwest at the moment. It's a merger of the old university that you had in the Potchefstroom and you had in, the Setswana-speaking people had their own university. They merged. Do you want to separate them now? Do you want to do the same with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where you had Westville, of Indians and Asians, and then you had University of Natal for English-speaking people? And so do you want to recreate that? Where do we go from it? So I think that this is horrendous thinking, to think that we can go back to where we came from rather than trying to build a new South Africa.
Ian?
It's actually quite easy to respond to. Professor, I think you're actually the one contradicting the Constitution at the moment. The Constitution creates space for all the different cultures in the country to be represented. And if we don't celebrate each other's beautiful languages and we don't celebrate the cultural diversity in South Africa, then we will not be representing what the Constitution says. So, in fact, through making mother tongue education a priority across the board, and I'm not talking about religious languages or sign language, we are talking about the 11 official languages of South Africa. Through making that a priority, we will be emphasizing our constitutional right and to celebrate our cultural differences, our cultural diversity in South Africa. So this would be a step to forget the past. No one would be excluded. We would find a way to include all the cultural groups and also include all the different language groups. And just to add to that, it's got nothing to do with race or separation in many areas in the country, and you can go speak to the students yourself. A lot of the students who speak only Afrikaans as their mother tongue aren't white students, so it's got nothing to do with a racial thing. And definitely not only with a cultural thing. This is simply to say that we need to develop the languages in which we think, we pray, and we do everything we do throughout our days in this country.
You don't think that your focus on Afrikaans actually contradicts everything that you are saying? In other words, what would have happened, what would take away from your cause if you were to say we are fighting for a recognition of all languages and not just Afrikaans, and not talk about even setting up a university that will teach in Afrikaans? Don't you think that's how you should approach it rather?
Vuyo, it's a very good thing that you're saying there. And if you go and read our statements of the past year or longer, we do say that all the different languages should be developed.
By the way,
mostly a Afrikaans group, and therefore, of course, we will encourage it. But we will support other cultural groups as well in their fight to have mother tongue education. So it's not one or the other. We are saying we are building up and we are proud of our culture. But in the same way, we need to create room in which we can respect other cultures and help them to develop their mother tongue language in education.
Prof?
I think here we are dealing with two paradigms of thinking around constitution and constitutionalism, that I do accept the desire to be able to say the Constitution recognizes 11 official languages. I've said there are more, and they are adding. Right now, we are dealing with questions of Mandarin coming in. We are dealing with, even if because of the economic power of China, but we are also dealing with areas in South Africa where Kiswahili, people from Eastern Africa, are speaking. If you go to Sunnyside in Pretoria and so on, very soon they will say the Constitution was written way back, and now we need to improve on this. So we can't keep on really reproducing divisions. The question then is, how do we have a language that builds a nation, but within that we recognize all the other languages and they are taught? In other words, students can choose to write their essays, whatever they want to write, and so on, but in their languages of choice.
But Prof, are we not reaping what we've sown? In other words, have we not, 21 years down the line, 21 years into this democracy, have we delivered on this particular, on this part or sphere of our lives?
We haven't. I think.
But isn't that the problem? And perhaps less that Ian and those he is, and like-minded people are just pursuing what they believe they should pursue. In other words, they are not necessarily wrong.
They have a right to pursue it, but in pursuing it, if their thinking was to be implemented, what are the implications?
But whose
for
job?
Building a new South Africa?
But then whose
That's
job
the issue.
is it to strike that balance?
All of us.
Is it him?
I don't blame him. I don't blame him. I don't blame the Afrikaner group
Who should
for
we blame,
pushing
or who
their
should take
boundaries.
responsibility?
And it is the responsibility of leadership in the country. What we lack is really leadership that begins to understand the complexity of the society, the plurality of the society we are dealing with, and to be able to say, under these circumstances, what do we do? We should have the official language, but at the same time give room for people who want to pursue their writing and presenting whatever they're learning about in their languages. And we have a way in which we shall be able to mark them, to be able to assess them, and so on. So there is a language that tries to common to everybody, but at the same time give room for people who want to extend. We don't want to destroy languages. Mind you, that one of the problems that we have had in Africa is under colonialism, the destruction of African indigenous languages. It is not just the Afrikaans. And from that point of view, yes, I believe that we should have a strategy that makes it not simplistic way of saying it is English, finished. No, it is English, but in other aspects we allow other languages also to be used.
Okay, Prof. Ian, we're going to take a quick ad break. This debate continues after